The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Barriers, the taller I become, the farther you take my rights away, the faster I will run. You can deny me, you can decide to turn your face away. No matter, 'cause there's something inside so strong. I know that I can make it, though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong. Something inside so strong. The more you refuse to hear my voice, the louder I will sing. You hide behind walls of Jericho. Our lies will come tumbling. Deny my place and time. You squander wealth that's mine. My light will shine so brightly it will blind you. 'Cause there's something inside so strong, so strong. I know that I can make it, though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. Brothers and sisters, when they insist we're just not good enough.
Good day, beloved. Welcome to Faith Without Borders. I am your host, Pastor Sauls. What a joy it is to have you with us this day. As we continue our series, 10-part series. We are today going to be on the 7th installment as we're making our way towards probably one of the most consequential elections in modern-day United States of America. And finding ourselves, caught, of course, between the pandemic called COVID-19 and its destructive and ferocious force that it has, impacted so many lives, and has been very, very revelatory, in what it has revealed around inequities for it, especially health inequities. And then, of course, it has certainly amplified the epidemic of racial injustice, especially as it relates to the consequences of white supremacy through institutional racism, as well as the ongoing practice of racial capitalism. And so for the next 7 weeks, we have journeyed with this theme entitled Intersectional Convergence, Organizing and Mobilizing for Inclusivity, Equality, and Equity. And we've kind of tackled that theme from a variety of angles. We've looked at the census, we've looked at the voting season, we've looked at equality from a variety of places, equity, and also shown how these are so intersectional, in our lives. And so I've basically invited us all to gather at the intersection to see how these issues affect, our lives. This is certainly a momentous, perilous, as well as tremendous time to live in right now, and it is indeed a joy for me to kind of be in the midst of it with so many others. And this morning, our two guests are two that will again shed some light on some of the issues as we zoom in on some of the propositions and the measures that will be on the November ballot. We want to remind you to make sure you complete your census. The end of this month is the deadline, not unless we hear otherwise in the next couple of days, because a lawsuit has been filed to facilitate an injunction around that September 30th deadline. So we haven't heard any results yet. So, but let's go ahead and do what we can in the next couple of days to make sure that you are counted. And then also this past week was voting registration day here in the United States. And so we want to make sure that you put your voting plan together as we enter the season of election. We're not talking about election day anymore, but the season of election, by making sure that you are registered to vote, making sure that you are on that registration. So verify your registration and then vote as early as possible. Vote by mail. It doesn't mean you don't have to do, like I always do, making sure that I get to wherever my polling station is, and just, a walk on the shoulders of those who've gone before us and all of that. But go ahead and get your vote in as soon as possible, because we know what the Trump administration, continues to do around sowing doubt in the electoral process, but also the challenges around voter suppression that is hot right now and ongoing. So we want to remind you of all of those pieces. Today we're going to be focusing on two very, very critical items, issues that will be on the ballot. One is for Los Angeles County, and the other one is for the state of California. And we're going to zoom in on all of that. I'm so glad this morning to welcome to Faith Without Borders once again my friend, my brother, my comrade, Pastor Eddie Anderson. He is the senior pastor at the McCarty Memorial Christian Church here in Los Angeles, who is on the front lines, with all of us as he continues to do prophetic work, as he continues to do priestly work, and as he continues to do pastoral work from the sanctuary to the streets. I appreciate him and love him much. Let me welcome him, and see if he's live and well and awake. I'm sure he probably had several cups of coffee already. But he's the man, my brother from another mother. Pastor Eddie, how you doing, sir?
I'm well. Good to see my brother.
Good to see you, man. Let's always take care of business first. How are you doing? How's the family? And all that good stuff.
I'm doing all right. My family's doing okay, and my family back in Atlanta is doing well as well. So thank God for that.
Great. The ATL, man. Yes, sir. All right now. We wanted to check in, Pastor Eddie, on several, topics. I know the two of us, connect with so many, organizations. You are, a regional organizer with LA Voice, here in Los Angeles. You are with the Poor People's Campaign, Black Lives Matter, and so we intersect and connect on so many ways. So we're going to try and get to as many as possible, but especially, Measure J, around there. But I wanted to start off, with an article that you penned for the Los Angeles Sentinel that came out this past week. I think we have a picture of that article. If not, we're just going to continue, with it in the religion section, talking about just this whole, campaign to discredit Black Lives Matter, especially the spiritual aspect of Black Lives Matter. The two of us serve as co-conveners of Clergy for Black Lives, where we seek to bring a theological and a spiritual framework in support of Black Lives Matter based on our understanding, interpretation of the social gospel, and the prophetic role that we as faith leaders and that faith itself plays, this integral aspect of spirituality that's part of the movement of both resistance and reimagination. Tell us a little bit about, why, you felt the need to write that article, and maybe a little bit about, what it is about.
Thank you, brother. Well, I wrote the article. It's entitled "The Power of Libation," and the reason I wrote it is because I got a text message, and I mentioned this in the article, from my cousin asking me if Black Lives Matter practiced witchcraft. I was astonished, and I was like, "What?" And so he said, "You in the theology school, and you're a pastor. So what should you be doing? What does this mean?" And I really wanted to help bring some clarity from people who are a part of the movement, people who are with families who have lost loved ones that were stolen and killed by police-sanctioned violence and state-sanctioned violence. For folks who have been moving with this movement, and really bring some clarity around what exactly is libation, and what exactly is the discrediting movement trying to achieve. And for me, it comes down to power. Whenever black folks in this country, and we know there's always been two forms of black spirituality or faith. There was one that the slave masters, or those who enslaved our ancestors, gave us and tried to force feed us and will beat us if we did not repeat back to them. And then there was always the religion that came after the slave master went home. And that was the religion of liberation, the liberation of freedom, the religion that James Cone says is about not only our spiritual freedom, but our civil freedoms as well. And witchcraft is a buzzword that has often been used by folks who may be well-intentioned, but are so holy or so enthralled with white supremacy and manifest destiny and the dehumanizing of black people, that if you're going to discredit a people, you must discredit not only their humanity, but their spirituality. So we've seen that happen when they went over to the motherland, and they went across the shores of Western Africa, and what they did as they went across, they said, well, these people are savage, and because they're savage, their religion can't be intelligible, so we must call it witchcraft because we don't understand what's going on with them. But I will remind folks, and I remind folks in the article, that black religion has always been about the spirit, about the ability to share stories through the preacher and the music. If you want to know about black religion, when we catch the spirit, we move in a different way. We may say some different things. That's not witchcraft. We are people who believe that we wrestle not against flesh or blood, but a power and principalities, which means that we believe that there are demons, there are angels, there are good spirits and bad spirits, and that our ancestors are carried with us. That's not witchcraft, that's biblical. And then we look at the text and we see that Jesus himself acknowledges his ancestors, the God of Jacob, the God of Isaac, and the God of Abraham. That Jesus himself communes with his ancestors on a mountain, When you take Elijah and Abraham and Moses come down to visit, that's called poured out for libation. That's the Mount of Transfiguration, which we give that name. Jesus did not call it that. And then we practice it every Sunday at church when you take communion. But if you don't go to church, you've seen it in your neighborhood. When somebody dies in your family and you pour it out for the homies, that's libation. And witchcraft is a way to prosecute a movement that may actually revive the soul of America. And it's a time-old whistleblowing that folks who do not understand our spirituality choose to demonize it.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly as one was born and raised in South Africa, when we had a conversation about this among us as Clergy for Black Lives, I basically shared that, we have to be clear about the fact that in so many ways, the missiology, the evangelization that was brought to Africa was one infected with and affected, by dehumanization. Salvation, was, predicated, upon the fact that our ancestors, were looked at, as uncivilized, and so we have to really, distinguish between, mercenaries and missionaries, right? As we do this work. But I've learned that missionaries did not bring spirituality and faith to Africa. We've always had that as a people, and so it is so important that we realize that, and we see so many opportunities for libation when we have altars that are set up wherever somebody is gunned down, or wherever somebody dies. You talked about the murals that we have, and so it is an integral part to honor those who've gone before us. We do it at every funeral, right? Is a way, is a whole experience of libation, because we are honoring, celebrating, and lifting up the person that has gone before us. So we want to say, folk, that we ought not to be bamboozled by, again, one of the theological aspects of white supremacy, and that is to first, of course, dehumanize black folk, and then in so many ways, as part of that, to then see how we get destabilized spiritually by trying to give us just one particular aspect of religion, of spirituality around that. So thanks for that. I want to encourage people, check out the Los Angeles Sentinel. It is a powerful article, very enlightening and revelatory. Check it out, and of course you can always connect with any of us if you have any more questions around that. I always say we walk we stand on the bold and broad shoulders of those who have gone before us. And especially during this time, we call on the C.T. Vivians, we call on so many others, the Ella Bakers, we call on the John Lewises, and when we do what we need to do in this voting season, it is honoring them and pouring libation, through, our voting. So thanks for that, Pastor Eddie. Really appreciate that. I want to get to, Measure J, and I know we have a whole, collaborative called Reimagine LA. We've worked on, Measure J and what it means and all of that. I went to the Measure J website and we were able to get a little video, about it. So before, we talk about it, I'm going to try and see if we can just, bring some enlightenment to folk with a little bit information about this by just playing, this video, and then we'll continue our conversation, on the other side, of this. So. Let me just say, we at Faith Without Borders, we are unapologetically supporting, Measure J. It aligns with our values and our vision around beloved community. Pastor Eddie, I know you serve on the steering committee and continue to provide some awesome prophetic guidance around, Measure J and all the Reimagine LA work that is going on. Can you kind of just put this Measure J for us within context? Because I think sometimes, we look at propositions, in a vacuum, and kind of think of what's happening as ahistorical, if you will, right? But kind of put this into perspective for us in terms of, how do we land where we are and why is Measure J so important for us as we seek to reimagine the city and the county of Los Angeles?
Absolutely. So Measure J is the birth of two movements converging. The first movement is the movement for decarceration in our county, for we know that African Americans or black people are 8% of the population in Los Angeles County, but are over 30% of the jail population. That Los Angeles jails is the largest mental health provider in the world. But we also know that you can't get well in a cell. And so there was a 2-year study on what are the alternatives to incarceration. It came up with 70 different intercepts, 70 different interceptions around what we can do instead of locking people up, and how do we care for people and not put them in cages. The second movement that you know about is the Black Lives Matter movement. And we've been talking about Black Lives Matter movement, that we're not only marching for Black death, but also for a Black future, right? Black death may have caused us to come out into the street, but Black future is why we stay in the streets. And what we've noticed is that there's been a systematic institutional disinvestment in the community. That when you looked at COVID-19, you saw that there wasn't enough housing, especially in the Black community. You saw there wasn't enough health care in the Black community. You saw that there wasn't enough jobs, and that the essential workers weren't getting paid the money that they should have been paid to be taken care of in the way they should have been taken care of. Measure J says we can make all of that happen in Los Angeles, and we can have an equitable society. We can get on that road towards equity in our society, which means a strategic investment in the areas which have been divested from. And so the county budget is $30 billion. You heard that right. $30 billion. Most of that money is earmarked from the state to pay for things like healthcare and jobs and education. But they do have revenues. And so if you look at the revenues, it's over $10 billion a year. And so Measure J says, instead of just saying Black Lives Matter, instead of just passing a motion that says we need racial equity when we look at every single thing that legislatively we pass in Los Angeles County, what if we take 10% of the county revenues every year in perpetuity, that's between $900 and $1.6 billion, in this moment where everyone in the world is looking and saying, you say Black Lives Matter, but as they always say, are you saying it with your mouth and with your pocketbook? And so this says LA can actually put Black lives and brown lives at the forefront, those who have been divested from, those who have been incarcerated, those who don't have health care, those who are experiencing houselessness or can't find affordable housing, and the Black community, which needs a real resurgence of capital, because we know, and if you look at history, that after every recession in this nation, it's taken the Black community an additional 4 years to get back on footing when the rest of the world gets back to footing. So for that, what does that mean for us? It means that we're in for the long haul of recovery. And so this is in many ways, saying that for the next, in perpetuity, that we can invest in Black communities, we can invest in healthcare, we can invest in housing, we can invest in jobs, that we know the main proponent of the main opposition of this is the sheriff union and the DA union, because it says that we believe and we know that there's a better way than locking up our people. There's a better way than criminalizing communities and taking money out of the community. That we could put community resources and investment into our neighborhoods.
Thanks for that. You said it, right there, that what we are dealing with, right now, of course, is how to resist the prison industrial context. The prison industrial complex in the county of Los Angeles, as well as the law enforcement industrial complexes. Those are two institutions in the county that has a record, historically as well as today. They have been engaged in the incarceration, of black bodies, in this county. But not just that, but also the destruction of black bodies, if you will. These two, the convergence of these two, and how Measure J comes and basically make a statement saying that the devaluing and the destruction of black bodies in Los Angeles continues to be a moral crisis. In fact, let me go further by saying this. Inequity in Los Angeles County is a moral crisis. We might boast that this is a city of angels, but it is clear that we have angels, and then we have lesser angels, right? And the lesser angels are those, who are of darker hue and whose wings continue to be clipped by institutional racism, exploitation, inequity, inequality that has gone on, for many, many, many years. This is a tithe we're talking about. Both of us are pastors, out of, the billions that the county gets. What we are saying is tithe into proactive and preventative investment, right? Instead of continuing to feed reactive and destructive, measures that continue to happen, in the county. But this kind of connects back, Pastor Eddie, with, a report that came out after the Watts riots, right, in the 60s, where there's been a call for reinvestment, a call for reimagination, because people, a commission looked at the root causes, of all of these riots, all of these uprisings, and really it boils down to the fact that historically disinvestment in the black community has been the, how things have gone on, in the city and county. Let's make that connection for folk as well.
Yeah, so absolutely. When you look back at the Watts riots in the 60s, and you look at the systemic causes, it was poverty. People were in the street because they were tired of having the government step on their necks and taking the food out of their mouth, right? And so that's why you saw the Watts riots, right? If you want to talk about it in scripture this Sunday, I got to preach a little bit. Amos says that until justice is established in the gates, there will be wailing in the streets. So that's what we saw in the 60s, right? And then that continued, that the investment did not come. The money did not come. We know we had a war against poverty in this nation, but the money didn't make it all the way down. We did trickle-down economics in this nation, and the money didn't make it to the black neighborhoods. So in the 90s, you saw another rebellion happen. And at that time, the report said that you needed $3 billion to make the South Los Angeles, the places where black folks and brown folks live and occupy and live and move and have their being. You needed $3 billion just to get them on the same footing for recovery. The reports that came out after that said that what really happened in South Los Angeles was around $400 million. That's a third of the money that we needed just to get back on the same footing. So now that number has been exacerbated, and we have seen more disinvestment. You don't believe me? You can still drive down certain parts in Watts in the places that were burned in the 90s and the 60s are still vacant lots, right? That's a shame. That is a moral outrage, and the county has to do something about it. You're so right, Pastor Sauls. There's too many people who have been trying to fly in this Los Angeles, the city of dreams and of angels and a Hollywood town, but they come here and their dreams are broken because their wings are clipped and some of their wings are cut off because they have been kissed by the sun and God has blessed them to live in darker skin. And so we have to really deal with it, right? If we're going to have progress in this moment, if we're not going to allow history to repeat itself, but write a new chapter and sing a new song in this land, because so many of our people migrated here, we got to talk about investment. Investment that should have been ours in the 60s. Investment should have been ours in the 80s when they promised you trickle-down economics. The investment that they promised us in the 90s after the Watts rebellion and Rodney King was killed. We got to have investment because for too long, we've been okay with lip service. We've been okay with putting on a bulletin board. We've been okay with extracting our culture but not paying us for it. We got to talk about how do we put care first, because budgets are moral documents. And the budget of Los Angeles has said for over 50 years, Black lives, you don't matter that much to us.
And not just that, but we will profit from you, right? We will not just, devalue you, but we will discard you. And that's why, this whole movement around decarceration and the reimagination, of that. Yesterday we had the gathering of Push LA, which is another movement that's going on around all of this. We have, a Prop 17 on the ballot, and we'll talk about that one, next week, as well as the whole piece, around, defunding the police and this invitation to reimagine as well as, reinvest. Basically, what we are saying with Message J, Pastor Eddie, is, it is not just enough for folk now to have co-opted and adopted, Black Lives Matter, right? It's not just enough for you now to put it on your car, put it on your building, right? Make it part of your social media platforms. What we are saying is now it's the opportunity for folk to see how they can go beyond those words, right? And to see how they can engage in this work of casting their vote in support of Measure J. It's not just about hanging a banner that says Black Lives Matter. The opportunity now is before us, in front of us, to see how we can take bold action, right? To be preventative and to be proactive, around that. You and I know that in the county of Los Angeles, the life expectancy of a child, of a family, of a man or a woman is determined by their zip code. And if you really analyze those zip codes, you really kind of get a sense of who are angels and who are lesser angels. And as you say, the lesser angels are those who've been blessed, to be born in black bodies, right? And also, by tackling all of this, we are really also facilitating the convergence of inequality and inequity and distinguishing between those two, around that. And that's why that, is so critical, for us. I know you got to preach. I know you got your sermon rolling. It's popping. But any final words that you have, for us just around Measure J and why, not just as people of faith, but as folk, who are about the humanity and the dignity of sisters and brothers, why it is that we need to vote in the affirmative of Measure J.
Yes, I'll just say this for those who are Christian. Think about the scripture in Acts. In Acts chapter 6, they came to the elders of the church and said that those who were Greek and Jewish were not getting their fair share. They weren't getting what they needed, and so they had to rectify it because the Spirit does not dwell among mess. And so the question for you, when you go into the ballot, are black and brown communities worth at least 10%? And is that fair? If the answer to that question is yes on both accounts, then know the Spirit cannot dwell in mess, and the Spirit of God is upon you to vote yes on Measure J.
All right. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you taking some time to join us on Faith Without Borders. Blessings on you and the family and the ministry. I'll see you in the streets, and God, will continue to, move us, work in us, and guide us, during, these perilous and tumultuous time, making sure, that we do have a prophetic word out there that really challenges, the blasphemy of the prosperity gospel. That's really a theological justification, for trickle down, economics that is not, godly and not an integral part of how we get to beloved community. Thanks, Pastor Eddie. Appreciate it, man, and looking forward to us continuing to be about, organizing people power for liberatory progress. Much love, man. I'll see you soon.
Stay blessed, my brother.
Yes. All right, there we have it. Measure J is on and popping. I hope that we have been enlightened about it, and how it invites us, to share in it. We're going to transition to our next, piece. But again, we want to remind you about the census. It is coming to a close here in the next couple of days. And as I've always said about the census, it is about, respecting your dignity and your humanity and your presence, in the within the borders of the United States of America. Secondly, it is about representation. Who will be there to facilitate legislation that will move us, towards, equality and equity. And then, in addition, to representation and respect, it is also about resources. How do we make sure that we have the necessary resources that can provide a safety net for the least of these in our communities? Let's check out this video, and then we'll move on to our next proposition.
A lot can happen in 10 years. Your family can grow, your neighborhood can change. You might even choose a hairstyle you'll regret.
Aww.
The United States Census is about keeping count of all the people in the United States. It helps us give opportunities to grow, thrive, and be represented in government to those that need it most. In essence, the census is a survey of the population in our country. It helps us understand how many people live in our country. The census asks where you live, how many people live in your household, and any other information to determine the needs of the community. The census counts everyone living all over the United States, whether a citizen or not. It's for all people living here, working, building communities, and contributing to our country. This is important for many reasons. First, it allows government to know what neighborhoods are growing and what needs they have. For example, a complete count of the census can mean your community becomes more livable with parks, schools, roads, and much more. Also, businesses can use the census information to know what type of businesses and jobs are needed in your community. It allows an accurate number of congressional representatives in the federal government for each community. Think about it. If nobody in your town fills out a census, it's as if you don't exist and you won't be represented in the government, and your needs will not be heard. It's important for you to know that the information you provide is confidential and by law cannot be released to any law enforcement agency. Let's say that again. It's illegal for the Census Bureau to release your private personal information. No law enforcement agency will be able to look at the personal information you provide and will never ask for sensitive information such as your social security number. In the time it takes you to order a coffee, you could fill out your census. The census asks questions like how many people live in your address and their age, race, and relationship to others in the household. Make sure to count everyone in your household, from the baby to the grandparents, even your cousin Larry, who has been staying with you for the last 3 months. You can do this online, through the mail, or you might get a knock on the door. I know. Who does that anymore? So let's make everyone count. Let's make our voices heard. Let's participate in the Census 2020 and make our communities better places to live. To learn more, visit californiacensus.org.